We're going to talk about the importance of small groups in our lives and small groups in our church. Because this is what I hope that you understand. When you look at the Bible and you see the early church in the book of Acts, the way that they operate is this. They had large group gatherings, and then they had small group gatherings. They had large groups where basically they met in the temple courts. But the Bible says they also had small groups. They met house to house. And so what we as a church, we've decided we're going to follow the biblical model. We're going to have large group gatherings, but we're going to have small group gatherings as well. And this is what we've discovered, that you really can't experience church the way God has designed church to experience just simply in rows like this. I mean, that's why even last week, Stuart Hall said, if there's going to be real accountability in a Christian walk, it can't happen in rows. It's got to happen where? It's got to happen in circles. And that happens where? In small groups. Let me see if I can illustrate it like this. You see, our lives are like this Lego, right? I don't know about you, but I love Legos. I loved playing with Legos, when my kids were younger. We built all kinds of things with Legos. But the way that Legos are created is they are not created to stand alone. No, Legos are created, they are designed to connect, right? I mean, that's the way Legos are designed. And it's the same way with you. God has created you to connect with other people. And yet, in the American church, you know what we've discovered? Is that a lot of us are completely content with not connecting. I mean, basically what we'll do is we'll come to the Lego box, the church, right? And we'll have thousands, got probably 1,100, 1,200 people in this room right here, and we're satisfied with being in the Lego box, right? And we'll hang out with people, and you know what? We may, hang out and rub shoulders and have acquaintances at work. Or, you know what? We have acquaintances at the ballpark. Or even we come to church, and we're like, okay, yeah, it's great hanging out in the box with all the other Legos. And yet God says, no, that is not the way I've designed this thing. I've designed you to connect together. That's how I've created you, and you must learn to connect. That's what God desires. And yet the problem is, in America, we're one of the most disconnected societies there are. We're very busy. We've got busy schedules. We're always going different directions, and we don't have time to connect. Several months back, I had a lady in our church who came to me, and she said, Pastor Tony, I've got over 1,000 friends on Facebook. But if you asked me to write down one close friend, I couldn't do it. Why? Because we as a society, we are used to hanging out in the box, but we just do not know how to connect relationally with other people. Well, God wants us to connect. In fact, check this out. Look at this quote from George Gallup of the Gallup polls. He, through the years has surveyed hundreds of thousands of Americans. And look at what he says in this quote. He says, Americans are among the loneliest people in the world. As I surveyed Americans, I realized that they are lonely people. I mean, we are very prosperous in a lot of ways as a nation, but probably we have a relationship deficit. We are relationship poverty in America. Why? Because we haven't learned how to connect with each other. And yet God has a solution to our need. What is it? Family. Check it out. Look what the Bible says. In Psalm 68, verse 6, the Bible says this, God places the lonely in families. And that's what God desires. The primary relationship that God has to help us in relationship is families. But it's not just our physical family. God wants the church to operate like a family. And so we as a church want to start operating as a family. God is our Father, Jesus is our brother, and we start treating one another as brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. That is what we're supposed to be as a family. Now, are we a perfect family? Of course not. I mean, just like your family is not a perfect family. Everybody here comes from some dysfunctional family, right? You go, oh, I didn't know you knew. No, we're all come from a dysfunctional family, right? I mean, we do. I mean, the fact is, you probably got this know-it-all uncle. What? We all do, right? I mean, I've got this cousin who claims that he saw a UFO, and one time after his dog ate, he folded the napkin. No, he didn't, okay? He didn't do that, okay? I mean, you may have, a slutty aunt, or you got this, this mom or, mother-in-law that's always in your business all the time. We've all got this family. We've all got these members of our family that are just a little off. And if you're here and you're like, I don't have anybody like that, then you're it, okay? It's you, all right? Now, the fact is that we want our church to operate as a family. Does it mean we're going to be perfect? Of course not. But we want to operate like a family, and that's what Romans chapter 12 is all about. In Romans chapter 12, Paul gives us principles of how to make the church feel like home, feel like family. Now, here's the amazing thing about God's word. You can take these principles and apply them to any relationship in your life. If you want your marriage to feel closer, apply these principles. If you want your house to feel like a home, apply these principles. If you want to change your workplace, if you want to change your neighborhood, you apply these 4 principles. Now, I'm going to apply them predominantly to the church, how the church can begin to be and function like home. Why? Because that's specifically what the Apostle Paul's doing in this passage. So let's look at it together. In Romans chapter 12, beginning verse 9, I'm going to pull out several verses. Look at what Paul says. Verse 9, Paul says this, love must be sincere. Now look down at verse 10. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. That's family love. Honor one another above yourselves. Now look at verse 12. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Now, what I love about that is those verses are so practical right where we live. And what Paul's saying is he's saying, I want the church to feel like a big living room, that we all operate as family. But again, here's the thing. It ain't going to happen in this room. It can't happen. This kind of relationship that we just read about in the scriptures cannot happen in the large group gathering. It won't. It can't. It has to happen only in small groups. So if you want your house to feel like a home, if you want your church to feel like a family, you've got to apply these 4 principles from Romans 12, okay? I want you to jot them on your outline. The first is this. Number 1 is this. You need to be authentic. You need to be authentic. What does that mean? That means you're real. You're not fake. Look how Paul puts this in verse 9. Again, he says, love must be sincere. Circle the word sincere there. That means that you're real. Now that word, our word for sincere, comes from the Latin word, which means no wax. You go, what does that mean, no wax? Well, let me explain it like this. In Jesus' day, basically you would have pottery. You'd have these potters that would make pottery, and maybe some of them, didn't turn out right. They got cracks in them, or they got holes in them. And of course, nobody wants to buy a cracked piece of pottery. And so what would they do? The potters would then melt wax into those holes, into those cracks, and then they'd paint over it, and you couldn't tell that it had a crack in it. But then you buy it, and you take it home, and you put hot water or hot soup in it. What happens? It melts the wax, and then suddenly makes this giant mess. And so what potters would begin to do is they would begin to sell their pottery, and they'd say, it's sincere. It's no wax. And that's what the Apostle Paul is saying to us. Paul is saying, I want your love, I want your faith to be real. I want it to be sincere. I want this to be the real thing. Now, why is this important? Because listen, we live in a culture that they're always looking at us as Christians and going, is they for real, right? You know what the world does not want? They're looking for authenticity. And yet so many times what we portray is, okay, let's come to church and put on our, church mask, and we're perfect and we're fine, and we sort of communicate to everybody, hey, I'm perfect. Come join the perfect church, Silverdale Baptist Church, and if you can get your act together, then you can join our church as well, right? That's sort of the way we do. And we portray this Christianity that isn't real. It isn't authentic at all. I just got a flyer, this past week inviting me to a church in town. And you know what? When you see all the smiles on this thing, you go, how do they get their teeth that white? And it's just, it's just totally icky, fake Christianity. And you go, that ain't real. I know it's not real. I've been a Christian long enough to know that's not real, right? And so what happens is that people come here and we all wear our fake mask and we're not real with one another. And therefore, we don't really connect with one another. You know what I need? Is the same thing you need, authenticity. That I'm going to be real with people, And I want people to be real with me. And I'm going to have a real relationship with folks. And, you know what I really want? I'm attracted to people that take God seriously, but don't take themselves too seriously, right? That's what I want. That's what the church is supposed to be. Hey, I'm going to take God seriously, but I'm not going to take myself too seriously. Why? Because I got flaws and so do you. Several years back, we had our missions conference. And at our missions conference, I was sharing a devotion one morning with our missionaries, and I just happened to mention in that devotion that earlier that week, Susan and I had gotten in an argument with each other. It was just a passing comment. And then after I'd shared my devotion, we were having a prayer time with our missionaries, and one of our missionaries, stood up and said, Pastor Tony, you really shared something during the devotion that was very encouraging to me. And I thought, oh, I must have shared some amazing spiritual truth that just blew him away, right? And I go, well, what was that? Pride. And he goes, well, whenever you share that you and Susan had an argument this week, that really encouraged me. I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, because the fact is my wife and I, we argue too, and it's just nice to know that our pastor has struggles too. What is that? It's called being real, right? That's what we're called to be. We're called to be real. There is no fake Christianity here. If we're going to have real family, we've got to be real and authentic with one another. How do you do that? It doesn't happen in this room. It can't happen in this room. You've got to connect with people in a small group. That is when you can really get in each other's business. That's when you can really do life together. Not in rows, but in circles, okay? So if you want your house to be like a home, then be authentic. Be real at home. But then if you want the church to be like a family, you be authentic as well. But there's a second characteristic Paul gives us as well. Jot this down. Not only be authentic, but secondly, you need to be welcoming. Jot that down. You need to be welcoming. You need to make people around you feel accepted and loved and welcomed here. I think one of the saddest stories my dad's ever told was whenever he went back to visit his family in Switzerland after he had immigrated to the United States. Many of you know that my dad is originally from Switzerland, and when he was 18, he immigrated to the United States, and he worked in Utah for a year in a cheese factory. That's what he did in Switzerland before he immigrated. And so he worked there for a year. That's how he was able to get his immigration papers. And after he fulfilled his work duties, he then went to Texas because he always dreamed of being a Texas cowboy. And then, of course, it was toward the end of the Korean War, and so my dad joined the Air Force. And so he went to Korea, and while he was in Korea, he had an opportunity to have a 1-week leave because of all the things that he was getting done there. And he's like, what am I supposed to do for a week? He didn't know what to do. And so he's like, I know what, I'll go visit my family in Switzerland. And so he takes several days going through one transport plane to another, finally makes his way to Switzerland, hasn't seen his mom and dad for probably 3 years, and is all excited, thinking it's going to be a big welcome home celebration for Ed coming home. And he comes to his front door, knocks on the door, and his dad opens up the door and stares at my dad. And he goes, yeah? Who are you? And he goes, I'm Ed, your son. And then my grandfather, his dad, goes, leaves the door open, turns around, walks away, says, Margaret, Edwin's here. And he goes, sits down in front of the television. And that's the last conversation my dad had with his dad for the rest of his life. Why? Because he didn't feel loved. He didn't feel accepted. He made all that trip, and yet he never really felt, that he was wanted there. That's the way sometimes it is here. We're not intentional, but see, a lot of us are wrapped up in ourselves, and we've forgotten how hard it is to come to a place like this. You got all these people here and all these strangers here, and walking through those doors it's intimidating to be able to do that, right? I mean, a lot of us have grown up in church, been in church all our lives, and we just forget how hard it is to connect with church people that have been around for a long time, right? In fact, quick show of hands, how many of you, you struggle a little bit with new experiences, new places? Anybody? Raise your hands, right? Anybody feel difficult raising hands in front of church people, right? Yeah. Would you stand up, share how you feel there, right? I'm kidding. What is Paul saying? Paul's saying, hey, no, church is different. Check it out. Look how he says it, verse 10. He says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. That's family kind of love. You go, what does that look like? He tells us, look at the rest of verse 10. Honor one another above yourselves. In your outline, circle that. Circle honor one another. But it's not just honor one another above yourselves, right? I mean, whenever people come here, you know what? We don't need to just be concerned for ourselves. No, we need to honor one another. Can I tell you that if our church would apply that verse alone, that we come to church and our heart is, I'm looking for ways to honor other people around me above myself, it would transform this church. It'll transform your small group. Folks, it will transform this city. It will transform the broken country we live in right now. Because people have stopped honoring one another. We're all created in the image of God. Start honoring one another, right? That's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to be in a family. Can I tell you, every relationship problem will be resolved if we just apply this one verse. James Dobson, Christian psychologist, said 75% of marriage problems would be resolved if we just honored one another, the way this verse says. And so what are we supposed to do? When you come to church, look for ways to welcome people and honor people around you. You know, our tendency is we come here and we sit down and look straight ahead like this is the biggest elevator in the country, right? And yet what we should do, we should come here and go, okay, I need to look for somebody to encourage and honor today. I'm going to look for somebody that's maybe on the outside. I'm going to look for this mom that's struggling with a preschooler. I'm going to look for somebody that looks on the outside. I'm going to go out of my way to welcome people. And whenever people come to your small group, it needs to be the same way. You see, this is one of the difficulties of a large church. It's connecting with other people. It really is. And I get it that, you know what, some people are a little intimidating, right? You may, be talking to some teenager and she's got too much mascara and your highlighter, alert's going off. Oh my goodness, mascara alert, whatever. Or maybe, you're talking to somebody and they got all these tattoos. It's just a facade. Will you look past that and see the person, right? That's what we're called to do. And we are to be welcoming. I've shared this before. I mean, I'm part of a small group here. We've been together for several years. We meet on Sunday nights in homes. And I would say to my small group that they have refrigerator rights. You go, what does that mean? That means we treat each other like family. I mean, whenever they come over, they don't have to knock on the door. They're family. Come on in, right? If they're at my house and basically they need something, they're able to go into the kitchen and get whatever they need. They're able to rummage around my refrigerator. I mean, why? Because they're family. We know each other enough that they have refrigerator rights. That's what I say. You know what? If I came over to your house, and though you may know me and I know you, and we don't have that close of a relationship, it would be awkward if I did that, wouldn't it? Think of it. I come over to your house, and maybe we're just hanging out in the living room, and I go, excuse me for a second, and I get up, and I go into your kitchen. I start rummaging through your cabinets and through your refrigerator, and I'm pulling out bread and mayonnaise and mustard, and I'm slicing cheese, and I'm putting bologna down, and I'm cutting it up, and I just come back and you look at me, you probably wouldn't say anything to me at that moment, but the next day you'd call up your friends and go, can you believe what Pastor Tony did? He came to my house, and he made himself a bologna sandwich. Now, why is that awkward? I'll tell you why. Because we're not family like that. We don't have that refrigerator rights. But whenever you're in a small group, and you know what? You start connecting like a family does, and you learn to honor one another, suddenly you start relating to one another as a family. Again, it's hard. It's hard to do that in a large church. It's hard to do that in Chattanooga. Do you know why it's hard to connect relationally to folks in Chattanooga? Because most of us have been here our lifetime. We've got our family connections. We've got our close friends. We went to high school with all these folks. We've got enough relationships, and so basically we don't need anybody else. That's what we think, right? And you know what? You have guests that come in or folks from out of town that come in, and you know what? We play that little, remember when you're in elementary school, Red Rover, Red Rover? Red Rover, Red Rover. Send the guest right over. See if they can break through this chain. No, it's hard to break in. It is. But I'm asking you, will you try? Will you join a small group? Will you try to connect with other people? And you that are in small groups, will you go overboard and trying to make people feel welcome. Honor them above yourself. Don't just sit in your cliques that you're used to clicking with. Find somebody else. Honor them. Reach out to other people. Why? Because Chattanoogan's are not looking for a friendly church. They're looking for a church where they can find a friend. And that needs to be Silverdale Baptist Church. Make sense? Now, let me tell you, if you're here and you need to find a friend, I'll tell you how. 1, join a small group. 2, get active in a ministry. And I guarantee if you get in a small group and start serving along others in a ministry, you'll have more friends than you can acknowledge. Okay? So that's how you do it. So if we want our house to be a home, if we want our church to be like family, we do what? We welcome each other. We're authentic with each other. But then there's a third thing. Jot this on your outline. You need to be positive. You need to be positive. Do you know the number one reason why children do not like to go home and visit their parents or grandparents? Number one reason why? Because it's so negative there. I mean, I've heard parents bemoan this. My child never comes over. I mean, I love my grandkids, but I never get to see them. Do you know why? Because you were so hypercritical the whole time they lived there. Do you really think they want to go back there and visit that? Of course not. I mean, some people, they don't even want to travel home during the holidays. Why? Because home is not where the heart is. Home is where the hurt is. And you know, God convicted me several years ago that was me with my kids. True. One day, one of my kids said, "Dad, you're a dream buster." What? Yeah, you always point out the negative. You always point out the critical. I mean, you always tell why something won't work. I mean, and you know what? They were dead right. Why? Because I'm the dad, and I want to look out for their good, and so I'm always pushing them to the next success. And what happens is I became a critical person of my kids, and I realized something. My kids are never going to want to come home one day because all they got at home was negativity. All they got home was nothing positive but what's negative. You contrast that with how the Apostle Paul says the church family is to look. Check it out. Look at how he says this in verse 12. He says, "Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction." Circle the word joyful, circle the word patient. Does that characterize your home, joyful and patient? Does that characterize your marriage, joyful and patient? Does that characterize our church and your small group, joyful and patient? This is something I've discovered. In every relationship you have, there are positives and there are negatives. There are. My wife, Susan, and I, we've been married almost 35 years. If you asked her to list all the positives about Tony, she could write a list. But you know what? If you asked her to write a list of the negatives of Tony, she could make that list as well. Right? And even though we've been married 35 years and hopefully I've matured over the years, the fact is she can still quickly come up with a negative list of me. She can. And it's the same with every relationship you have. This is what I've discovered. If you focus on the negative list more than the positive list, you know what's going to happen? Suddenly that relationship is going to feel like it's got a deficit. It's going to feel like, oh my goodness. I mean, this relationship is, I'm missing out. I'm missing out in this marriage, or I'm missing out at this workplace. I'm missing out at this, this neighborhood. I'm missing out at this church. This church has this negative, or this small group has this negative, or this relationship has a negative. Listen, you can always focus on the negative. And whenever you do, it's going to feel like you're missing out and you got a deficit. But what you need to do is say, you know what? By God's grace, I'm going to focus on the positive in this person's life. I'm going to be joyful and patient in this person's life. That's what I'm going to choose to be. You see, the natural tendency of your flesh and mine is to immediately go to the negative. It is. You know what? You got to choose to focus on the positive. I mean, think about it. Look at our news today. I hardly ever watch cable national news anymore. Why? Because it's always negative. It's always this crisis. It's always this problem. Oh my goodness, you watch this show. Why? Because we got to tell you what's so wrong about the world. And there's not like there's nothing wrong with the world. There's plenty of things wrong with the world. It is. But they're always going to focus on the negative, never the positive, folks. Never. I mean, think about it. Even the weather. What do they say? It's 20% chance of rain. Why don't they say 80% chance of sun, right? Why? Because negative news sells and positive news doesn't. This is what I told our staff several weeks back. Check out this quote. You may have hundreds of problems, but you also have millions of blessings. Focus on the blessings. Focus on the positive. You can always have an attitude of gratitude. There's always something in your life, something in that relationship you can be thankful for. You know what? I can be thankful that my house is a mess. Why? Because that tells me I got a family. I can be thankful that my clothes are a little tight. Why? Because that tells me I've had plenty to eat. I can be thankful that my lawn needs mowing, the windows need cleaning, the gutters need fixing. Why? Because that tells me I have a home. There's always, you can look at the negative or you can look at the positive. I'm telling you, focus on the positive. The early church, their business card was joy, and their marketing strategy was love. It's the same way with us. Our business card ought to be joy, and our marketing strategy is love, because love never fails. That's how you have your house become a home. That's how church and small group can start feeling like family. But there's one final ingredient that Paul gives us in this passage. Authentic, welcoming, positive. Fourth characteristic of this, jot this down. You need to be caring. You need to be caring. It's almost like the Apostle Paul says this. He says, just in case you missed it, I'm going to put it on the bottom shelf for you, just so I'll spell it out for you exactly what you need to do in these relationships in church. Check it out. Look what he says, verse 12. He says, be faithful in prayer, share with God's people who are in need, and practice hospitality. Circle three words. Circle the word prayer, circle the word share, circle the word hospitality. Those three words will revolutionize a church and a small group. That you know what? There are people in your life that are struggling, and you know what you got to do is just pause long enough, put your arm around them and say, hey, can we pray about this? Pray. That you know what? There's people in your life that they're struggling with some need financially. And you know what you need to do? Paul says, share financially in their need. There are some individuals, you know what, that feel on the outside looking in. You know what you need to do? Paul says, practice hospitality. I'm telling you that those three principles, Paul says, let me just put it right down where you can understand it. You need to, in your small group, pray with each other. You need to financially share with each other, and you need to practice hospitality with each other. Watch what happens. Suddenly that group feels like family. That's what's going to happen. Most of you have probably seen the movie The Blind Side. It's based on a true story of NFL lineman Michael Orr. It's a story, Leanne Toohey, Christian lady in Memphis. Michael was growing up in the worst projects in Memphis, very dangerous. And one day, it's just a few days before Thanksgiving, Leanne sees him walking one night on the side of the road. She pulls over and invites him over for Thanksgiving. But then when she discovers his need, she actually provides a place for him to stay. And then eventually they adopt him into their family, and it radically changes his life, and it radically changes their life as well. Check out this scene from the movie The Blind Side.
Over here you have a desk, chest of drawers. You have a nightstand, a light, an alarm. Oh, and Sean says all the pro athletes use futons if they can't find a bed big enough, so I got you one of those. Of course, the frame was heinous. It's not about to let that in my house, but I got you something nicer.
It's mine?
Yes, sir. What?
Never had one before.
What, a room to yourself?
A bed.
Well, you have one now.
You see what Leanne Toohey did? She took her Christian faith and said, okay, I'm going to be real. I'm not just going to speak it anymore. I'm not just say, hey, I'll pray for you. God bless you. No, she went and met the real needs. Paul says, pray with one another, financially share with one another, and practice hospitality. You know, I love that phrase, practice hospitality. Why? Because most of us don't have it down. I don't have it down. You got to practice it. You practice something over and over and over again until you finally get good at it. Paul says that's the way hospitality is. You got to practice it again and again and again. Now, can all these things happen in this room? No, they won't. They will not happen in this room. The only way we can apply the verses we just studied is in a small group in church. That's it. That's the only way that this is going to be lived out, is in a small group. This past weekend during our Equip conference, one of the ladies in our church came to me and she says, Pastor Tony, every year for 10 years that I've been at Silverdale, I've heard you give at the beginning of this school year the small group talk. And you encourage us to get in a small group. And for 9 years, I totally ignored you because I wasn't going to do it. But last year, I decided, okay, I'm going to sign up and I'm going to do this small group thing. And she says, this is the best year of my life. Don't stop telling people to get involved in a small group. It has transformed my life. Folks, I can give you hundreds of stories like that because I see it all the time. Individuals that go through a crisis in their life and they're connected in a small group, suddenly they have a family walking with them through that crisis. But I see the opposite. Folks that come every Sunday to Silverdale and yet they're not connected in a small group, what happens? They go through a crisis and they often go through it alone. Why? Because they don't have a small group. I don't know if you saw the story or not, but this happened last month. A family was visiting Panama City Beach. They were on a family vacation. This happened in July. And the mom was on the shore, and she heard her 2 children screaming for help. And she looked out in the water and realized her elementary children, boys, were drowning. They'd gotten caught in the riptide and were taken away. And so the mom goes out there to rescue her boys, and the grandma goes with them as well. The 2 of them get caught in the riptide as well and are carried away. It gets worse. The grandma has a stroke in that moment. They're screaming for help. And then what happens? Check out this picture here. The people on the beach hear this, and they join hands. And they literally form a chain, a human chain, out into the depths of the water. And they're holding hands and they grab hold of this family and they bring them in. And every one of them is rescued. 80 people joined hands and did this. And the people there, the lifeguards there, or the folks that took care of them said they would have drowned if that hadn't happened. You see that picture there? I love that picture. I love that. You know what that is? You know what the picture of that is? That's a picture of the church. You know what that is? That's a picture of small groups. That's what that is. Because every one of us, look, one time or another, every one of you are going to find yourself in the currents of this world and you're going to be drowning. And you're going to need somebody to go into the deep waters and rescue you. And the only way that's going to happen is if you are connected in a small group.